Welcome back. Now that we got the Hart Parr running and driving, let's start knocking off a few of these little projects. I think the first one we're going to do is we're going to remove this drawbar and straighten that out and figure out some piece of rubber or something and possibly even bolt it solid so it doesn't swing. 'Cause running it, this thing vibrates and sounds absolutely terrible. Try to get rid of as many of these unneeded rattles and clanks and bangs and vibrations so I can listen for the important ones. So let's see if we can get this taken off today. We should be able to. There's one bolt up in the front there that it pivots on, and then we should be able to take the whole thing right off and bring it over to the press and see if we can straighten her out. It wasn't bad at all. Nuts came right loose. Guess we're gonna have to get a new bolt though. It's a little bit of war. Let's see how bent this is now. And there's considerable wear. A lot of welding will need to be done to build it back up, but for now we'll just get it straightened out and cleaned up a little bit. It's pulled a little bit in its life. Well, that was a little bit of a struggle getting all these bolts loose. They were on there pretty good. Had to get the big boy sockets and wrenches out. Beat on them a little bit. We got them loose. These ones should clean up fine once I chase the threads. This one was bent and it broke off. Maybe we'll see if we can salvage the nut, because that's a kind of an oddball, oversized nut. We'll see if we can find any of them first to come up with a new bolt for there. I'm guessing it was probably supposed to be a square-headed bolt originally, since everything else is. This is like a homemade thing, I think. It's threaded on that end. It had that notch on that end and with the cotter key in the bottom. I'm guessing this was maybe replaced at some point. Any Hart Parr experts out there, let me know what that really should be. Try to put all the correct hardware back on this tractor. Obviously we got to buy a new bolt for the front pivot point there. It's halfway worn through. We'll add one of them to our order list. Nuts should be usable. So I'll chase the stuff here worth chasing, threads, and put back together what we can, and then we can put this back on the tractor. Oh, I straightened up the bar there too, so that's all good to go. Making progress. It's a little bit better, huh? I say once we run off some proper hardware, we can finish that project. Moving on to the next thing. Well, the nice days in North Dakota are getting limited. I wanted to get a few more things knocked off the to-do list before it gets winter. So today I came up and I took the transmission top cover off and I cut a new gasket for that. Cleaned up the cover, put new lock washers, put that all back together. So that should not leak nearly as much now. I've been scraping some gunk off of here and there. I don't know if I showed you yet. I've been working on replacing leaky gas lines and fittings and shut-off valves and slowly getting that kind of stuff tuned up. We have yet to take apart the starting tank and hook up a line to that yet, because we've been just using the big fuel tank. But eventually we'll get that all done too. I don't know if I showed you, I replaced these emulsion tubes. So when you're idling down and you're burning, designed when you're burning kerosene, the fuel will go down one tube through a little heating chamber in your exhaust manifold, which is what that is, back up through and into your intake. So it warms up your fuel so it burns better. But even if you're just burning gasoline, it still does that, because that butterfly, when it's all the way closed in the intake, is basically between those two lines. So it still goes through there. And those lines, all the nuts were cracked and broken. So I made up some new lines and new fittings, and that all seems to be pretty good. Underneath the tractor here, we talked about these drip lines where they collect all the oil from the crankcase bottom. One there, one there, one there. There's a little drip tray underneath each cylinder, each piston, and then it collects and it pipes its way down to each final drive. This right-hand side of the tractor one was plugged up because that oil was collecting in the crankcase and not actually dripping out. So I took all that apart and cleaned that line out, so now it actually is working its way down into the final drive like it belongs, like it should. I didn't take that side apart because it seemed to be working and it isn't terribly dripping, so for now we're going to leave that one alone. One thing I fixed here on the front end, as far as the steering goes, when I was steering before, it was steered okay, but you got to a certain point where it was really stiff, like it was binding up. Well, here I figured out this bolt here, it was in the other way, so the nut was on top and it was sticking up far enough, it was rubbing on the steering arm here. So when it would come by that bolt, it would bind up until you got past it, and then it would steer free again. So I got that taken apart, flipped it around, put the nut on the bottom. It was actually a thin-headed bolt. I'm assuming they did that on purpose for clearance there. So that fixed that problem. It steers so much better now. Okay, so last night, I didn't film any of it, but I took apart this front tie rod for the steering. Took that off, took these bolts off on either side to investigate what was going on there. Because this side had that goofy little piece of steel as a washer. Things were all kinds of loose. So I took it apart, found out there really was no reason they had that washer in there. I think they just had it in there as like a little spacer or something. So I removed that. Discovered that there is little oil-like washers, bronze bushings, whatever you want to call them, in this tie rod that are all wore out. So we'll see if we can round up some new ones of them. I'll probably either find or make up some new, all it is basically is a bolt. I already got some, this one was missing a lock washer, you know, chase the threads and the nuts, all that kind of fun stuff. And I just put it all back together as is, and it's already considerably better, you know, just minimal play and stuff. Because I've been trying to, whenever I fix, I try to make it where I could put it back together like in that same day or the next day or whatever, because I've been trying to keep the tractor in a running, drivable state, at least until winter gets here and we know it's parked for the winter. Then I'll take apart things a little bit more extensively to rebuild and replace things as necessary. But I'm still enjoying, like, you fix a little something, you get it running, you go take it for a couple of laps around the yard and you park it. And that gives you that adrenaline of, ooh, that's fun. I get to drive the tractor after I fix something. It kind of keeps the motivation going for the project. When you got a whole tractor tore apart in 1,000 pieces, sometimes it gets hard to get the motivation to continue working on it. But this gives you the satisfaction of being able to drive it when you can. So that's kind of my motivation for now. So I took that apart, you know, I fixed those, I straightened it out. The bar was a little bit bent, so I put it in the press, got that all straightened out, put it all back together, and that's just one less thing to kind of worry about. Like I said, I'll get some more stuff, and this winter we can take it apart and fix it properly. I think for today's little semi-simple project, I think I'm going to see if I can get this radiator cap off to address the rebuilding of, there should be a seal in here. The parts book calls for a rubber seal. I think we'll just use a piece of thick cork. Try that at first. And there should be a thin piece of steel plate that holds that cork in place. And then these are supposed to be bolts, machine screws that thread up through the cap into the winged emblem that hold that all in place. So those will need to get removed. That's going to be a chore. To do that, it's going to be easiest to take this whole cap off of the radiator and bring it back to the shop to work on. That'll also give us a chance to replace this pin, the hinge pin, which is very worn. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice the pin. I'll take the hacksaw, cut it off so we can get the cap off, and we can bring it back to the shop and work on it. It'd be nice to get that fixed because this has obviously been riding worn for a long time. As you can see, the cap is actually worn right down into from vibrating, running loose there or whatever. It should actually run up, whatever, like that, if that cork or rubber, whatever is supposed to be, gasket is in place, it should ride there. But because that's missing, it's been riding down like that for a long time. So let's see if we can get that off and bring it back to the shop and see what we can do. I think another reason I'm going to tackle this today, or at least begin it, is I think I probably have everything I need to tackle that project on hand. I don't think I actually even have to order anything, so that makes it even easier when you don't have to wait for materials. Okay, cap is off. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that is that. So we got a chunk for the hinge. We can get that one out. You can see how it's worn and bent. Like I said, I just cut it off to get it off the tractor. Sacrifice that, no big deal. Got some thick gasket material left over from a different project. I have some stainless little, these are just scrounge, I don't even know where these came from, corner pieces for flashing for something, but it's stainless so it won't rust. We'll cut out a piece of that for the little oval to hold the gasket in place. Should work. It'd be nice if it was a little bit thicker, but for what it's doing, that should be fine. And the price is right. Let's see if we can get this apart. This will be the hardest part, is getting this apart without wrecking anything, and getting this pin out without wrecking anything. No way. Can you believe I got one of these bolts loose? Look at that. I can't believe that. I thought for sure we were going to be drilling and tapping and all kinds of complicated stuff to get this apart. Well, we're not out of the woods yet. We've got a second one to go here, but I just took a nice sharp little cold chisel and got the little sliver of metal from underneath the head and a little bit of futzing around and got it to twist right out. We'll see if we could do the same one with that. I figured these are going to be the hard part and this would be the easy part, but so far this has been the hard part. I'm trying to get that pin out and broke both ends of that off, so we'll probably have to drill that out. But if we can at least get this part apart, I'm going to take that as a win. See, I told you it was going too good. Got the parts apart, but of course one is snapped off in the wings. So I guess now we see if we can figure out how to set this up in the drill press and see if we can drill out enough where we can snag the rest of the threads out of there. And we'll have to do the same with this, see if we can figure out how to set it up and carefully drill out that. We're moving right along. Drilled out, new pin made. That works fine. Got that last bolt cleaned out and retapped nice and clean. That worked out good. A lot of dinking around to get those threads chased out without cross threading or nothing, but it all worked out good. Suppose I'll probably have to get some just straight slotted screws, because these are those Phillips and straight combinations. The originality in me wants it to be just a straight headed one again, even though they only see that if you open up the radiator cap, but I'll know, so probably get some of them, but those will work for now. So let's cut some gasket and figure out a little metal plate here, see if we can get this all done tonight. Okay, cork gasket, something like so. Made up a quick 30 finger template of what the stainless piece will look like. Something like that, you get the idea. And we'll bolt through that. So now, take this, cut it out of that. Yeah, let's put it together, see if it works. There. That's pretty respectable. I think that'll work. True test will be when we actually put it on the tractor, but I think it should work. Worst case scenario, depending on how that flange fits, you know, if this needs to be trimmed down or changed or anything, you know, if the gasket is the right thickness and the right, how tight I made it, whatnot. But if we got to change it, all it is taking those two bolts out and a little modification if necessary. But yeah, I think that'll work. Cool. There. That worked out pretty good. One more thing. Done. Okay, a couple of easy projects today. We got some new hardware in. New bolt for there, put that in. New bolt for the front pivot point to replace that wore out one. Reuse the original nuts, double nutted on that. We can put the drawbar back together and that project will be done. Swapping out the correct stainless straight-headed machine screws for the Phillips ones I used before, because you know I'm touched like that. Okay, so I'm swapping out some hardware. There was a missing nut and bolt for that fender there, so I got that corrected. And the same story over on this side on the bottom there, that nut and bolt was missing, so I got that put in, snugged up. As I was down there, I started looking. Okay, so on this side, the right side of the tractor, there is this plate here that is not on this side. And this side looks like it's got 4 bolts. And over on the right side here, if it will focus, come on. I got, looks like a broken off bolt there. There's no head or nothing. One bolt there. And possibly another broken off one on the bottom front. And a bolt up on top. And I believe this plate looks like it has been welded on there. I don't think that's just grease. Yeah, that sounds like weld. So, Hart Parr people, what's going on there? Is that supposed to be there, or is that some type of a farmer fix or old repair? I don't know what I'm looking at there exactly. So, let me know. Leave a comment below. What's going on there with that axle plate there? Just swapped out some new hardware for the radiator mounts, basically to replace some bad and mismatched hardware there. There's a mixture of hex and square and different lengths and washers and no washers, and so at least we're consistent now with square-headed and the same length. I think this is the correct hardware, but there again, if anybody knows, be sure to correct me if I'm wrong. I try to get all the hardware correct when I restore a machine, because it's those little things, in my opinion, that make a good restoration a great restoration. If you try to keep all of the hardware correct and matching, kind of like I did here. Somebody had a square bolt there, so I swapped it for a hex so they match. I started this project trying to correct a different problem. This front radiator, I don't know if you can tell on camera, is misaligned to the front casting there. I don't know if you can tell that. The radiator sits like this compared to the tractor. And I thought what was going on there was because it was mixed-match hardware, that the radiator itself was sitting too far forward on this mounting angle bracket that mounts to the main frame. So I thought by correcting the hardware, I could also shift that radiator back, straighten things out, and we'd all be good. But that's actually not the case. Those holes are perfectly lined up. So either the misalignment is in these holes to the frame, or more likely this bracket was never drilled out quite precisely enough, even from the factory. So if that's the case, someday we will take that bracket off, re-drill it basically, probably weld up the holes and re-drill them in a slightly different location so we can move this back. Now you're wondering, well, why go through all that effort? Is anybody really going to notice that? Well, yes, I did. Because if you look at the radiator here, these last 3 bolts are put in upside down compared to the rest. And I started looking at that like, well, why is that? Did somebody just put them in it backwards? But no, they had to do that because on this end, when the radiator is in the correct location, there's enough clearance behind that casting. But it slowly comes forward, and then by the time you get to even here, that bolt is hitting the frame. Even these ones are just barely clearanced to that casting. So by the time they got to the end, they had to flip them over, otherwise they were really hitting, or they could have gotten shorter bolts. But the point is, it's not aligned the way it should be. So if for no other reason but for that, I want to correct this. And that'll also help. That might be part of the reason for this radiator overflow tube is bent on the end. I believe it should be right down straight next to this bracket as opposed to being dog-legged out here, but I think they did that when things weren't lined up. So if I correct that, we can also straighten that back out and get it to be, because you can see right here where there's a little spot where that tube was wearing. You see it right there. So originally that tube was here, but somewhere along the line something changed. So maybe now that I see that, I actually just discovered that as I'm talking to you. So maybe these are really slotted or something where there is a little bit of adjustment there, possibly. Or another possibility, maybe, no, I don't think so. I was going to say, did somebody put the bracket on upside down? No, that couldn't be because of different size hardware. Dropping bolts everywhere. Or could they have swapped them side to side? I don't think that's the case either. A little more investigation will be needed to do a couple measurements, but because obviously this machine has been kind of fixed in the past, so things have been apart and whatever, so somebody might have swapped around parts there, maybe. Anyway, so that's kind of the stuff I've been up to, just kind of swapping out hardware and correcting little things. I'm not sure what we're going to tackle next year, but be sure to check back next week. We'll be working on something. It's actually kind of a decent day here. It's cold, but it's sunny out. I think this fan shaft will probably be one of the things we will tackle sooner rather than later. I want to take that apart and check out all the bearings on both ends. You can see what kind of shape that stuff is in. And then while that is off, I can straighten out this bent up fan shroud and we can put some hardware in there at the same time. But that's a little bit more in depth. We got to take all that apart to do that. And like I said before, trying to keep the tractor functional, at least until we're completely packing away for the winter time, so to speak. So thank you all for watching. Be sure to check back. Share this with your friends if you know anybody that's into Hart Parrs. Thanks for watching. See you later.